The couple. In Eden Lake, Jenny spends most of the movie running from a gang of violent teenagers after a trip with her boyfriend Steve turns into a nightmare. After watching Steve die, she manages to escape the forest, completely wounded and traumatized. When she finally reaches a residential neighborhood, it seems like her luck has changed. Jenny reaches a house where a party is taking place and begs for help. The adults bring her inside, treat her wounds, and tell her that she's safe now. Except there's a terrible coincidence. This is actually the house of Brett's parents, the leader of the gang that spent the entire movie hunting the couple. Shortly afterward, Brett shows up and coldly lies, saying that Jenny and Steve were responsible for the other teenagers' deaths. Without even trying to hear her side of the story, the adults believe the boy and decide to protect him. Jenny screams that it was all the boy's fault, that they started it all. Brett's father doesn't listen and locks himself in the bathroom with her. The movie never shows her death, but the screams make it clear that she doesn't manage to escape. In the final scene, Brett puts on Steve's glasses and deletes all the recordings from his phone that could incriminate the gang. The trade. In absentia, Callie Russell seems like the character with the best chance of uncovering the mystery until the very end. A former drug addict, she moves in with her sister Tricia to help her while she tries to move on after the disappearance of her husband, Daniel, who vanished without a trace years earlier. But the two soon discover that there's something much more terrifying behind the disappearances connected to an old tunnel in the city. As the story progresses, it becomes clear that a mysterious creature lives there, capturing people and taking its victims into an underground world hidden inside the walls of the tunnel. When Tricia is also taken, Callie decides to do the only thing she believes can save her. She goes to the tunnel alone and tries to negotiate with the creature. Her offer is simple: take her own life in exchange for her sister's. But the monster interprets the deal in the cruelest way possible. Instead of returning Tricia alive, it simply spits out the fetus she was carrying, making it clear that there is no negotiation or mercy. In shock, Callie tries to escape, but she ends up being grabbed and dragged into the concrete structure. Everything happens quickly and only one of her shoes is left behind, indicating that she has also disappeared. After that, Detective Mallory investigates the case, but comes to the wrong conclusion that Callie simply started using drugs again and ran away. In the final scene, he walks through the tunnel without noticing anything strange. Meanwhile, the viewer sees Callie trapped in the darkness, being held by the creature with no hope of escape. The envelope. In Drag Me to Hell, Christine Brown believes she has finally escaped the curse placed on her by Mrs. Ganoush. After being tormented for days by the demon Lamia, she discovers that she can only survive by passing the cursed object onto someone else or burying it with a dead person. Convinced that she has found the solution, Christine breaks into a cemetery, digs up the old woman's body, and places an envelope inside the coffin. She leaves believing that the nightmare is finally over. The next day, Christine meets her boyfriend, Clay, at a train station. She's calm, excited, and ready to move on with her life. But everything changes when Clay gives her back an envelope that she had left in his car. At that moment, Christine realizes that she made a fatal mistake. She mixed up the envelopes and buried something else instead of the cursed button. The real object had been in her hands the entire time.
God, no!
Before she can do anything, the ground begins to open. Demonic hands rise from the depths and drag Christine into hell. Interestingly, Sam Raimi decided to keep this ending from the beginning because he wanted to move away from the idea that the protagonist always finds a solution at the last second. Final smile. In Smile, Dr. Rose Cotter believes she can still defeat the entity that is haunting her. After discovering that the curse passes to another person when someone witnesses the victim's suicide, she decides to isolate herself in the old house where she spent her childhood to face the monster without putting anyone else at risk. There, the entity takes on the appearance of Rose's mother, forcing the protagonist to relive the trauma of watching her die when she was still a child.
You can't escape your own mind.
Even shaken, Rose confronts the creature, sets the house on fire, and manages to escape. For a few minutes, everything seems to indicate that she has finally won, except that victory never happened. Rose realizes that everything was an illusion created by the demon itself. In reality, she never left the house. The entity reveals its true form, takes control of her body, and destroys any chance of escape. At this moment, Joel, her ex-boyfriend and a police officer, finds the hideout and breaks into the house to save her. Unfortunately, he arrives too late. Already completely controlled by the entity, Rose takes her own life in front of him, exactly as the monster had planned from the beginning. By witnessing the scene, Joel becomes the next victim of the curse, keeping the cycle alive once again. The final dive. In Sea Fever, Chauvin is a marine biology student who boards a fishing boat to study the ocean. When the crew encounters an unknown creature, they discover that the animal carries a deadly parasite capable of infecting everyone on board. While the others panic, Chauvin uses her scientific knowledge to try to understand the threat. In the end, the two of them set their own boat on fire to burn everything that has been contaminated and escape in an inflatable boat. But Omid, who can't swim, slips while climbing down and falls into the water, and the creature's tentacles begin pulling him to the bottom. Even knowing the danger, Chauvin dives in to save save him and manages to pull him back into the boat. However, during the rescue, she comes into contact with the parasite and realizes that she has been infected. Knowing that she can't return to shore and put thousands of people at risk, Chauvin makes an extreme decision. She says goodbye to Omid and gives herself to the ocean, disappearing among the creature's lights. Thanks to her sacrifice, Omid manages to survive and is rescued without carrying the infection. The end of the world. In the cabin in the woods, Dana Polk travels to an isolated cabin with 4 friends, unaware that they are all part of a secret ritual. Each one represents a typical archetype from horror movies, and Dana was chosen to be the Virgin, the final survivor. After escaping the attacks at the cabin, Dana and Marty discovered that everything was manipulated by a secret organization. The goal was to sacrifice the 5 young people to prevent the Ancient Ones, gigantic entities, from destroying the world. Because Marty survives when he was supposed to be dead, the ritual remains incomplete. The two break into the laboratory and release all the creatures trapped inside. The facility descends into chaos as monsters take out almost all of the employees. At the crucial moment, the director explains that there is still one last chance. Dana has to kill Marty to complete the ritual and save humanity. She even points the gun at her friend, but she can't pull the trigger. Before any decision can be made, the monsters attack and kill the director. Dana is seriously wounded and realizes that there is no longer any way to stop the disaster. Instead of continuing to feed that cycle of sacrifices, she and Marty accept their fate. Then, a gigantic hand breaks through the surface and destroys the cabin, marking the awakening of the Ancient Ones and the end of humanity. The Mask. In 2017's Leatherface, nurse Elizabeth White works at a psychiatric facility when a riot breaks out and she ends up being taken hostage by a group of escaped inmates. The movie is a prequel and tells the story of how the most famous killer in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise became what he is. During the escape, Lizzie gets close to one of the boys, Jackson. He's the only one in the group who treats her well and who clearly didn't want to be there. But Jackson isn't who she thinks he is. His real name is Jedediah Sawyer, Jed, the son of that infamous family of killers everyone knows. Near the end, Lizzie manages to escape and runs down the road, and she almost makes it, but she ends up stepping into a bear trap and gets stuck there, unable to free herself. Jed reaches her with the chainsaw running and hesitates, so Lizzie makes the last bet she has left. She tells him that he isn't a killer, that he's different from that family, and it's working. He starts lowering the chainsaw until she makes the only mistake she could possibly make. She calls his mother crazy, and then there's no turning back. The attack is fatal. The next morning, while the family burns the evidence, Jed goes down to the basement and sews his first mask, with Lizzie's face. Total darkness. In quarantine, reporter Angela Vidal follows a team of firefighters to film what seems like an ordinary news report. But everything changes when the residents of an apartment building begin acting extremely violently, causing the entire building to be completely sealed off by the authorities. With no way to escape, Angela and the cameraman Scott record every minute of the nightmare. After surviving several attacks, the two reach the top floor of the building, where they discover the truth behind the infection. An apocalyptic cult was hiding there, responsible for stealing a modified version of the rabies virus from a laboratory, which ultimately caused the horror seen throughout the movie. Since the entire story is told from the camera's point of view, this final sequence becomes even more tense. The environment is plunged into absolute darkness, and all the audience can see is the greenish tint of the lens. That's when the infected attic resident appears and attacks Scott, causing him to drop the camera on the floor. Alone, Angela tries to recover the equipment while crawling. It looks like she's going to make it, but... The Survivor. In Friday the 13th, Alice Hardy goes down in history as the franchise's first major final girl. She agrees to work as a counselor at Camp Crystal Lake, which is about to reopen after being closed for years because of a series of tragedies. The problem is that one by one, all the staff members start disappearing, and Alice soon realizes that there's a killer on the loose. In the final confrontation, she discovers that the person responsible for all the deaths is Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mother. Convinced that her son drowned years earlier because of the counselor's negligence, Pamela seeks revenge against anyone connected to the camp. After a desperate fight, Alice manages to grab a machete and defeats the killer, bringing the massacre to an end. When everything seems to be over, she falls asleep in a canoe on the lake. Then, one of the most famous scares in horror happens. But it was all a nightmare, or was it? In the next movie, months after surviving the massacre, Alice is still trying to move on with her life. Right at the beginning of the movie, she finds Pamela's severed head hidden inside her refrigerator. Before she can react, Jason, now an adult, appears and kills her, turning the franchise's first final girl into his first victim, the Hand. In Talk to Me, we follow Mia, a teenager who is still trying to cope with her mother's death. When a group of friends introduces her to a mysterious embalmed hand capable of summoning spirits, she ends up getting much more involved than she should. What starts as a game turns into an obsession, and Mia becomes manipulated by entities that exploit her grief and guilt. By the end of the story, she believes that her mother's spirit is trying to help her. The entity convinces Mia that Riley, a boy who became possessed during a session, will only be freed if he dies. Convinced that she's doing the right thing, she takes the boy out of the hospital and brings him to a busy highway. At the last second, Mia realizes that everything was a lie created by the spirits to make her commit a terrible act. She tries to prevent the tragedy, but ends up falling in front of the cars. After the impact, Mia wakes up seemingly unharmed and returns to the hospital. But something is strange. Nobody responds when she talks. Her father simply walks right past her, and Riley appears alive, recovered, and surrounded by his family. When she looks into a mirror, she realizes that she has no reflection. That's when she understands the truth. She's the one who died. The hospital lights disappear and Mia is swallowed by darkness. In the distance, a single flame appears. She walks toward it and suddenly places her hand on a table. On the other side, a new group of young people holds the embalmed hand and says the words,
"I'll let you in."
"The last way out." In the pyramid, the final girl is Dr. Nora Holden, an archaeologist who enters a newly discovered pyramid in Egypt with a team led by her father, Miles Holden. What seemed like the biggest discovery of their careers quickly turns into a trap, as the place was hiding a very dangerous creature. After the group becomes trapped inside the pyramid, Nora watches her companions die one by one. The threat is Anubis, a monstrous version of the Egyptian god of the dead, who protects the place and turns the expedition into a desperate fight for survival. Even surrounded by chaos, Nora is one of the few people who can keep a clear head and realizes that this place wasn't an ordinary tomb, but a prison built to keep Anubis trapped. In the final confrontation, Nora is captured and tied to a sarcophagus. Anubis is about to rip out her heart and weigh it on a scale, exactly as he did with her father minutes earlier. If the heart is pure, he will finally be released from the prison. If it isn't, the heart becomes food. Before he can do it, a horde of cats attacks the creature. Nora takes advantage of the distraction, frees herself with a hidden blade, and runs. Wounded and exhausted, Nora makes her way through a ventilation tunnel and finally reaches the surface. It's that classic moment when the horror seems to be over. The protagonist survived, escaped the nightmare, and made it out. Except the pyramid doesn't give her a victory. When Nora wakes up, she finds a child playing with the crew's camera. Before she can understand what happened, Anubis appears from the shadows again and lunges at the two of them. The movie ends at that moment, making it clear that Nora never really managed to escape. The wall. In the Blair Witch Project, we follow Heather Donahue, who leads a small documentary project about the legend of the Blair Witch. Along with her friends Michael and Joshua, she enters a forest to investigate local stories, but the three of them end up completely lost. As the days go by, strange sounds, wooden symbols, and increasingly inexplicable events turn the trip into a true nightmare. Near the end, Joshua disappears during the night without leaving any clue. Hours later, Heather and Michael begin hearing his voice coming from the middle of the woods. Convinced that their friend is still alive, they follow the screams until they find an old abandoned house in the middle of the forest. Michael runs inside while Heather tries to follow him with the camera still recording. The two make their way through the halls of the house, hearing noises coming from the lower floors. Suddenly, Michael goes down to the basement and his screams abruptly stop. When Heather finally reaches the basement, the camera captures one of the most famous images in horror history. Michael is completely motionless, facing the wall, not reacting to anything. The scene references the legend of Rustin Parr, a killer who, according to the story told in the movie, forced one child to face the wall while he killed another. Before Heather can understand what's happening, something attacks her from behind. She screams, the camera falls to the floor, and the image ends in silence, without showing exactly who or what killed her. This decision to never reveal the Blair Witch was one of the main reasons the movie became a landmark in horror. By the way, on screen there's a video where we show you fates worse than death in found footage movies. Click and watch it. I'll see you there.